Thanks for the invitation to come out. Thank you all for coming out for part of your Saturday. An initial little bit of housekeeping. I work for Paramount Pictures, which is owned by Viacom, but I am not here representing either Paramount or Viacom in connection with the comments. I handle video on demand in the hotel and residential markets. And prior to that, I spent about 7 years with the Walt Disney Company. Prior to that, a brief period, a couple of years at Universal. What's up here now, and I think Patrick alluded to the windowing issue. So if you kind of take a look, this is intended to kind of show how things were and how things have proceeded. And basically what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through the distribution chain, generally and kind of specifically in terms of VOD revenues. So titles start out theatrically. They then go into a non-theatrical window, and non-theatrical window is usually composed of exhibitions for airlines, for hotels, prisons, oil wells, armed forces. Yeah, I know. Who would think that you can actually make money from the prison system? The titles then go to home video, which, as was mentioned earlier, turns out that that is the largest revenue stream currently for any of the studios. That's followed by the residential VOD and pay-per-view window. Then you get to pay TV, basic cable, and syndication. So just briefly, to make sure that everyone is on the same page, the difference between pay-per-view and VOD. Pay-per-view is scheduled exhibition of content. So the film's going to start at 8 o'clock. It's not going to start at 8:15. You have no ability to stop it, fast forward it, pause it, rewind. As opposed to VOD, where you have all those abilities to do trick functions, plus you get to go and select the time that the content's going to start. So if I go home and I need to walk the dogs, and I'm finishing up that walk at 8:10, and I get ready at 8:12, I can go and start my film. Whereas in a pay-per-view environment, I have to rearrange my life in order to meet that schedule. There's one other element, and that's called NVOD. And NVOD is something that the two satellite broadcasters, DirecTV and EchoStar, offered up. And that was that titles would be made available approximately every 15 minutes. So that while it's not quite video on demand, it does give you a little bit more latitude as to when the content is starting. In the residential window, there are a couple of different flavors in terms of how VOD is offered. There's transactional VOD, which is where you get to go and select a title such as Transformers or Star Trek for that one individual viewing. There's also free on demand. Free on demand is a slight misnomer because really what occurs is either pre-rolls before or after the content occur, so that there is some advertising, and that's what's supporting the free. The other variation is SVOD, which is basically all-you-can-eat buffet of the titles for a set price for a period of time. And usually what the studios will ask for is something along the lines of, $5 to $7, and you'll be able to access as much content as you'd like for that period of time. Let's talk about the timing for the windows. Well, I should take a step back. I live in primarily the non-theatrical and the residential. My windows and the availability of content from any studio is predicted based on the rules set out by the home video market. So when I can go out with content, when a studio can take the content out, is determined based on the street date for the home video release. In the hotel window, I can go out approximately 30 to 60 days before that content is going to be streeted. In the residential VOD market, the holy grail for all 6 of the major studios is to be able to go day and date with the home video release. Only one studio right now is doing that, and they're doing it with about 80% of their content. That would be Warner Brothers. Universal and Fox are doing it with more titles, but not quite all of their titles. And the big holdbacks would be titles such as family titles, things that you're going to tend to want to have in the house purchased via DVD. In my residential window, I am constricted by not only the home entertainment street gate, but I'm also constricted on the back end by the pay TV agreements. And those pay TV agreements will indicate whether or not I can go and offer content for SVOD, whether or not I can offer a viewing window of longer than 24 hours, whether or not just about actually all of the rules that affect my business are set up against it in the pay window. The big money in the distribution comes in the home video window, which I mentioned before, and the pay window. There are currently 4 pay services, 3 of which you should be fairly familiar with, that being HBO, Showtime, and Starz. And recently, Paramount, through Viacom, Lionsgate, and MGM are offering a 4th pay service called Epix. Some of you may have noticed in the trades this past week that Epix got its first carriage deal with the telco Verizon. Those deals will throw off a fairly substantial amount of money because there is a rate card attached to those deals. And the rate card reflects basically, based on box office, how much that pay service is going to pay. The windowing for the pay deals runs around something like this. You'll have the first pay window is anywhere from 12 to 18 months, depending on the service. It will usually, the contract will usually say that the title has to arrive at the pay service within approximately 12 to 15 months of the initial theatrical release, or within 6 months of the home video release. And then based on how the title is performed in the domestic release is how the studios are paid. And it's not on the gross. It is based on the film rentals. So even though you may go and take a look on Monday and see that a title such as Star Trek has grossed $254 million. That is not what is coming into the studio. The studio has to share that revenue between the exhibitor and the studio. So usually it's 45–50% of that actually comes back to the studio. In terms of the residential VOD window, let me kind of just walk you through. So the main clients for a studio consist of the direct broadcast satellite providers, which are either DirecTV or Dish Network, or the cable providers, and usually the studio's licensed to aggregators. So there are third-party intermediaries that will go and license from the majors and from independent studios, and then turn around and take that content and make it available for to the cable operators for the service. The final piece for the residential VOD is the telcos, and those would primarily be AT&T and Verizon. Now at Paramount, we're structured slightly differently in that we have a digital distribution group, and that group handles licensing the content to folks such as PlayStation, for Amazon, for Netflix. Those are all their clients, and they're separate and apart from the clients that Worldwide Television licenses to. Also, I should mention that I handle specifically Canada and the US. Although my title says Worldwide TV in it, that's kind of a misstatement. That the rest of the globe is handled by some colleagues of mine. So what I'm going to talk about to you is primarily Canadian and US distribution. Let me kind of give you an idea also briefly as to how contracts are structured. So normally what we do is a lot of output agreements. And output agreements, for those of you not familiar, require that the person who we're licensing to take whatever titles are released by the studio. As long as there's the minimum threshold is that there's a theatrical release of the content. And as long as that occurs, then these licensees are going to wind up taking it. Those deals usually take anywhere from 6 to 12 months to actually negotiate. They're rather lengthy in terms of the requirements, because since you're going to wind up taking all content from the studio, the licensees want protections as to, making sure that they're not only going to get films that have performed at a lower rate at the box office, but they're also going to get the Star Treks and the Transformers at the same time. Agreements are usually divided in terms of the territory that they cover, the language that they cover, and the media that they cover. So an example would be, we would not license to one entity for both US and Canada. Those would be two separate agreements, specifically covering when they can release materials in those territories. Also, agreements are broken up by language. So if I'm doing a deal for Canada, I'm going to have a portion of the agreement that's going to reflect that not only is English-speaking Canada going to be covered by that agreement, but also French-speaking Canada. So the studio will have to provide content that's dubbed or potentially subtitled. Let's also mention some of the hotel licensing. Hotel licensing for a studio usually is an 8 to 9 million, possibly up to the mid-teen, depending on the year. We wind up providing content in all of the hotels across the country. Those are licensed to third parties who then have deals with the independent hotel properties. The usual period of time is about 4 to 6 months for that content to be out there. In each of these windows, one of the key elements is that it's exclusive to that period of time. That's the basis for how the studios go about these. So the purpose for the studio during the non-theatrical window is you're only going to be able to get it in an airline or a hotel. It's not going to be available generally. The purpose for the residential window being limited is that you're only going to find it for that short period of time available either on VOD or through a digital offering. And that's how we go and monetize these films. The same for pay TV. It's an exclusive licensing. The library comes in after it's gone through each of these windows, whether it be basic cable or syndication, and you are then able to go and turn around and take that same content that you paid a fair amount of money to produce, because a film currently today is about $40 to $60 million to create, and that doesn't include the prints, that doesn't include the marketing. So by the time that you get to a syndication window, excuse me, or later, that cost is sunk. And you're able to take that asset and then monetize it anew. The first window, like I said, is 12 to 16 months. Then there's a period of time when the studio can go and license it either to basic cable or a network sale. Originally, you had a situation, excuse me, where you could only do one sale. You could do one sale between your pay 1 and your pay 2. And that sale could either be to a network, which it usually was at that time, or to a basic cable. As the networks got out of the movie business, it's become more a situation where you'll find that there are multiple basic cable sales between windows, between pay 1 and pay 2. You can now do 2 to 3 sales, and that period is usually a time of 5 to 7 years before pay 2. Pay 2 then picks up, and pay 2 is usually about a 12 to 18 month window. After you're done with pay 2, you would then traditionally have gone into the syndication window. And the syndication window occurred at a time when there were only 3 networks. There were additional local channels. Those local channels did not have the money to go and create programming for the local markets. So what they wound up doing was buying movies to go and run against the network programming. In the late 80s, early 90s, with the advent of the Fox network and UPN, that business no longer was viable. The other part that affected the syndication business was, if you take a look, there are about 6 opportunities that you as consumers have to go and view that content before it gets to the syndication window. So the likelihood that you're going to wait, you know, maybe 10 years, maybe 12 years, to go and see a film like Harry Potter that just came out is rather slim to none. Okay? You will have already had an opportunity, which is why that window no longer has as much value to the studios as it once did. I think that there should be a brief mention of mobile exhibition in terms of whether or not, how many of you guys are going to be watching content on an iPhone or other device or mobile device. I'm not sure that theatrical titles really work all that well when you get to a device about this size with a screen that big. I don't think that that's a very compelling offering. I think it's much more of a compelling offering for short-form content to occur in that window. I think that's about it for...
Seth, thank you very much. Appreciate it.